Field Vision Sports presents The Matchup with Sasha Bushka.
Kyler Murray kind of looks like a little kid running from his parents when he scrambles in the pocket.
Scott Bushka.
I had to tell my daughter that today wasn't really about her first day of school. It was really about me and the launch of our company.
And Cody Alexander.
Randomly, no. As somebody who's been around football my entire life, I literally can say that I've never smelled smelling salts, nor have I ever seen anybody actually have smelling salts. I'm sure that they were used at some point.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome into the matchup by Field Vision Sports. Excited to be with you as always. Our post Super Bowl breakdown. I'm joined now by filling in for Cody Alexander, sitting in a big boy seat, Felix Johnson, and the Cooper DeJean of Field Vision Sports, Scott Bushka. Well, we know Felix couldn't be the Cooper DeJean. Tell us, how we feeling today?
Hell yeah. I'm pumped to be Cooper DeJean coming off what should have been a Super Bowl MVP performance, pick six, number one rated DB in the entire NFL, shutting down Travis Kelce on my birthday. I'll take that comp any day of the week.
What
Pumped to be here.
Number one rated DB over what period of time?
Yeah, I saw that stat some there. I'm going to have to get you some specific details on that. I think his playoff performance helped him. I know he's up there in our Havoc rating, but not quite number one yet.
Yeah, fair enough.
There's no debating that he/I had a very good performance on our birthday Sunday night at the Super Bowl.
Cooper DeJean's birthday. I love it. We're coming up on the birthday of Field Vision as well. Exciting stuff coming up in year two for sure. Felix, I want to start with you watching it at home. Let's just start with this. There's no getting around the fact that all three of us are Chiefs fans. And it was basically over from the jump. So Scott and I were down in New Orleans, and I've just been telling everyone it was a great time right up until the game started. But what did the Eagles line, the big uglies, do to the Chiefs offensive line to basically make it a non-game from the get?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting, particularly with how, like, we talked a lot about whether or not the first time these two teams played in the Super Bowl, if it was going to have an impact or not. And I think the Eagles had the game they wanted to have in 2022 this season, because if you remember that pass rush had set all sorts of records for sack percentage or whatever it was at the time, and this year's defense was probably better all around, but they probably just weren't as good when it came to rushing the passer, even though their secondary has been better. Obviously, they get Jalen Carter and their new influx of talent over the last couple of years. So it's just kind of interesting to see the two sides of the same coin, where sure, the defense is better, but they're not suited to do what they did until this year, until they absolutely needed to. But I mean, they just dominated the Chiefs where the Chiefs have had issues. They sent four exactly, or the edge rushers were dominating the tackles. Like, Joe Thuney is an all-pro guard. There's a reason he's an all-pro guard. And like, he's 6'5". It's not that he's not he's not big enough to play tackle. He plays guard for a reason, because he's a great guard. And so the Chiefs had him out at left tackle at a necessity. Jawan Taylor became a little bit of a problem in the later games in the playoffs. And so the Eagles are just like, all right, we know exactly where we need to attack, and we can drop 8 in the coverage. No problem, especially with Patrick Mahomes. Once you get pressure on him, he kind of loses confidence in his footwork. And once that happens, the game's over.
Yeah. I shouldn't say we. I mean, it's okay to be Chiefs fans. We're Chiefs fans, but the Chiefs got exposed all over the offensive line. And you said it, like, and Sasha, we talked about this a little bit. Like, the Chiefs might have been better off trying to integrate DJ Humphries back into the lineup at the start of the playoffs and put Joe Thuney at guard, because then at least they would have been really solid up the middle and had a better shot at running the ball. But they got exposed at left tackle because you got a guard playing left tackle. They got exposed at left guard because Caliendo's a backup. Mm-hmm. They got exposed at right tackle because Jawan Taylor's just average, and the times that they put Kelsey out there to block one of the Eagles DNs, it went poorly every time. And I don't know if you've seen any of the video from some of the Travis Kelsey clips and just his general effort, but he seemed to be a step slow all night, which is, I don't quite know how to explain it, but it's probably also a function of him aging and being past his prime. So Chiefs line got exposed. I think it's important to put that in the context of the other really important thing that the Eagles defense did, which is completely shut down the Chiefs short game, right? And their defense has the ability to. So if you go back and watch the film, we already talked about Cooper DeJean. He is out on Worthy in the flat before Mahomes has any ability to throw it to him, right? So if you think back to the Steelers games and that game against the Texans and all of those, and the game against the Bills, all those routes the Chiefs had been running, where it's like snap it, get the ball out quick. The Eagles jumped into all of those windows before Mahomes could throw it, right? And you couple that with quick pressure, and they basically couldn't do anything. What they had to do was what they did late in the fourth quarter, which is just throw bombs and hope that they connect, right? But I think that they went to that game plan too little, too late. What the Eagles were saying is like, you have to beat us over the top. You're not going to beat us the way that you want to beat us, and the Chiefs couldn't do it.
And I even think the Chiefs' complete refusal to even hand the ball off, like just not even saying, like, even the Eagles, I know that their game all year long has been Saquon Barkley figure it out to the tune of 2,000 yards and probably the greatest running back season of all time. But even when the game was going tough and like he wasn't getting the yardage that they needed, they're still like, all right, we still got to kill clock or figure something out. And obviously early you have the more opportunities, but like you're saying, they had too little too late. We're trying to play too much of the short game in the middle of the game. And so that middle eight becomes, even when they had the advantage to get the ball after halftime, they couldn't run the ball because they didn't want to.
I think the Chiefs realized, you guys both said too little too late a couple of times, but they realized they needed to run the ball at about the time they were already down too much to run the ball. They should have been from the game. And then there's the fact that they had a backup left guard in because Tooney's playing left tackle, and that killed their ability to run the ball compared to the way they were late in the season before Tooney kicked out as well.
Yeah, we know Andy Reid has problems running the ball, and at times goes away from it. I think the issue here is that they couldn't run the ball, and the dirty little secret of moving Tooney out to left tackle is it essentially evaporated their running game, and so they were like screens and swing passes to Xavier Worthy became their running game, right? Like they were using the quick passing game to effectively act as runs and get 4 yards on first down, and the Eagles took it away, and they couldn't, like, we weren't strong enough up front to get anything with the run game, and so it completely hamstrung them in this game.
Well, and I even think, like, if they're not even getting the yardage, like they're not getting 5 yards a carry, whatever, and they hadn't been getting that all season long because Pacheco, as explosive as he is, he gets hit immediately after he crosses the line of scrimmage. He just breaks a couple of tackles. And then Kareem Hunt, he's very old. We've seen it all year long. They just completely refuse to even try. And even in the couple times that they handed the ball off, Pacheco had a couple of carries that broke for like 5 or 6 yards. It was more yardage than what they were getting even just throwing the ball, and it was just hitting the dirt. So that was the more frustrating part. And like particularly Andy Reid, like he was an offensive lineman in his playing days, coached offensive line his entire life up until becoming a quarterback's coach with the Packers back in the day. But then nowadays it's just like whenever he doesn't want to run the ball, he's not going to, and that's that.
Yeah, heading into this game, all we heard, like, for the last, basically since the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year, but like as the playoffs go on, the fever pitch gets louder because the teams that are left are the teams people talk about. But all we've been hearing about is how great Spagnuolo is, how great Spags is. And this isn't a conversation piece to rain on Spags, but leading into this Super Bowl, it was what's Spags going to do to the Eagles offense. he's going to be great because he's always great in big games. And we didn't really hear anything about Vic Fangio. And Vic Fangio has been a great defensive coordinator in this league for a long time, but he was 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes. So I say all this to lead into this question. Was this the best performance of Fangio's career?
Yeah, the only thing I will say, and I don't want to take anything away from Vic Fangio, because he is a great defensive coordinator. He's shown to be a great defensive coordinator, and to avoid this becoming a Chiefs podcast, I think we need to transition. Yeah, like we're transitioning from what went wrong for the Chiefs to what went right for the Eagles. It's not like Fangio did anything exotic, right? He executed the game plan that we know to be successful. We know to be the only way to beat Mahomes and Andy Reid is you got to get quick pressure with 4, right? And you got to have a really, really sticky secondary. And the only reason I say that Vic Fangio didn't do anything special is because he didn't. He rushed 4. He played quarters. The story of this game and the story of the season is that the Eagles just had better players than the Chiefs
everywhere.
Right. Yeah. And that game plan is great. That game plan is great, but you got to have 4 dudes that can win at the line of scrimmage, and you got to have players in the secondary that can stick to guys like Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown and Travis Kelce. And like it's not like the Chiefs receiving core is all world, but Xavier Worthy's fast. Hollywood Brown's a professional. DeAndre Hopkins is a professional. Travis Kelce is old, but he's the greatest tight end of all time, right? And they didn't have anywhere to go, and it's because the Eagles have good players everywhere, and Howie Roseman has nailed every single draft in the last 4 or 5 years. Like, go through their first and second round picks. They're all the dudes on that field dominating the Chiefs.
If nothing else, though, you give, and I'll let you go here in a second, Felix, you give Fangio credit for discipline in the fact that, like, he knew what was going to work if his guys won, and his guys were winning, and he didn't get cute. He didn't get fancy. He just called what was going to work.
Right. And I mean, you're exactly right. Like, they were bad defensively last year. They were 30th in the league in total points scored, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, they were openly bad with most of the same guys, with the exception like Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and obviously a couple players can change your team. But they were openly bad last year. And so obviously Vic Fangio has a lot of credit there. But I think, Scott, you nailed it with Howie Roseman. He honestly probably is the best general manager in football. I think we gave Brett Veach a lot of credit for his late round scouting and finding different guys being able, and the Chiefs were winning Super Bowls. So like those guys were playing on bigger stages more and more. So we kind of gave them a little bit more credit. Not necessarily that they didn't deserve it, but these guys at Howie Roseman, he's getting first and second round picks and they're all hitting. He's drafting every Georgia Bulldog and they're hitting. And so like, it just doesn't matter wherever the Eagles are drafting, whether it's high or low, they're hitting on their guys.
Yeah. I think Fangio looked at the like, to your point, Sasha, and to Fangio's credit, I think they looked at the tape and had a lot of confidence that they could play the base defense, the defense that they wanted to play, and were really had all of the tools to stop the things the Chiefs wanted to do. Right. I think they looked at the line of scrimmage and said, we can win all these matchups, not one of them, but 4 of them. And they looked at their secondary and said, we have the guys, like, we can stick on the Chiefs. And we know that if we put our guys in Mahomes' windows early in the play, our 4 defensive linemen are going to get home, which is like, that's the summary of the entire defensive game plan.
Yeah. And I think that's where to go back to the Chiefs just a little bit, where Patrick Mahomes can be to blame, because there were a couple of plays where they only rushed 4 and the Chiefs offensive line held up for a play, or like they actually got protection, and his footwork, he just got a little panicky and whatever it was. And again, the Eagles capitalized and picked them off and knocked balls down and were in the spots and capitalized wherever he was messing up. And we rarely see that from Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. I'll frame this from an Eagles perspective so we can look at it. The reality is the Chiefs did score 3 touchdowns very late in that game. The game was completely over. Nobody cares. It didn't matter at all. But if you assume that, like, they figured something out very late in that game that they could have done if the game wasn't over, there is the fact that the Eagles offense was consistently picking up all the 3rd and 4th downs early in the game to give them 40 points. If the Eagles only score, they had the pick 6 and the other interception that Mahomes basically gifted them 14 points.
Yeah.
But if the Eagles only have 28 at the point late in the game, and then the Chiefs figure something out, maybe it gets interesting. So the Eagles' ability to pick up 3rd and 4th downs, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 10s consistently was a big factor in that game.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Felix. I'm not so sure. And all I mean by that, like, my point of view on that game is the Chiefs defense hung on and did about everything they could, because the game's 24-0 at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
Mahomes gave them 14 of those points.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Eagles offense in the first half put up 10 points, right? And so if you go into halftime down 10-0,
yes,
the Chiefs have been down 10 at halftime of every single game that they've won in the Super Bowl. So like Sasha, you and I were in the stadium. We talked about how there were never moments in the first half where you had anything for the Chiefs to cheer about. Like, they actually got stops. They got some stops in the first half, right? Like, they made the Eagles punt. They got Brian Cook had the interception. If Mahomes doesn't give him 17 points, you're going into halftime down 10-0. And the reality is like, after half, the floodgates broke open, and you had another strip sack for a fumble.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know that the defense, given the position they were put in, could have done much better.
Yeah, there is the time of possession factor too. Like, the Chiefs were 3 and out every possession basically, and so the defense was just right back on the field constantly.
And you've said this and kind of got me to believe it a little bit, but every time the Chiefs lose, I'm gonna blame it on the offense, because knowing how good Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are, and now how good this defense is, after the defense got the stop, if you remember, the Eagles opened the game with the ball. The Chiefs get a stop. Your job's done. Like, knowing that the Eagles can score with the best of them, they put up 55 in the NFC Championship and eventually put up 40 in this one. You've done your job by getting that very first stop. It's up to Patrick Mahomes and the offense and Andy Reid and all that stuff to figure it out as the game goes along. But they just never figured it out early on. And like what Scott's saying, down 10-0 at halftime, Patrick Mahomes, this is routine at this point.
Yeah, and if we talk about Jalen Hurts for a second, I do think Jalen Hurts he's 100% just a winner. And Mahomes said this after the game. Someone asked him to comment on Jalen Hurts' performance, and he was like, "Look, he always just does what needs to be done to win, right? Like, sometimes that's running the ball. Sometimes, like, if he has to throw the ball, he's going to throw the ball. If he doesn't have to do much at all, he won't do it." And I think that's true about him. Like, I think he is just a winner, and he's proven it time and time again throughout his career in high school and college and the pros. Now he's got a Super Bowl to his name. With that being said, the Chiefs never put any game pressure on him, right? Like Hurts played that entire game without a worry or risk of any throw that he made. Right. And that was the exact, I mean, I said this leading up to the game all week. And quite frankly, like, it's the reason that almost everyone was picking the Chiefs, which most people were picking the Chiefs, including Vegas, even though we probably shouldn't have, is if it's a close game in the fourth, who are you going to trust, Mahomes or Hurts? I'm guessing that's still true, right?
Yeah.
We just, like, the Chiefs didn't hold on to the rope long enough to see that play out.
Yeah. And the testament to how much the Eagles dominated this game is, like, Saquon Barkley had 57 yards. They still, even with the fact that he was averaged 2.3 yards a carry, rushed the ball 45 times to 22 passes. Meaning, like, they were in such control of the game, they weren't getting any yards handing it off to Saquon, and they were still able to do it the entire time.
Well, and to Jalen Hurts' credit, like I think in a similar way to Lamar Jackson, he gets more credit for it because he's more talented, has the trophies and everything. But I think he's the perfect leader for that team and it's probably because he's a rushing quarterback where the whole team has to throw their jerseys into the laundry and what I mean, obviously it's the NFL, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. But when everybody's dirty and hurting and the quarterback's a part of it, when on most teams, the quarterback's the guy that doesn't get touched and he's got the offensive line to protect him. I think Jalen Hurts kind of lends himself, and he's the guy in the middle of the tush push that can't be too comfortable. So he kind of is the perfect leader for that team, this rough and tumble type of team, and his personality being as calm, cool, and collected as he seems to always be. And he's just the perfect leader, even though he might not be as talented as Mahomes or Allen or Jackson or whatever. He's still perfectly suited for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's a fair comparison to him and Lamar Jackson because Lamar Jackson has obviously put up a million more stats in his game, but like Hurts has won.
He's got a Super Bowl now.
He's got a Super Bowl. He's been to 2.
Mm-hmm.
He's just won more big games in general, and I think that the knock on Lamar has been when the lights are the brightest and in the big games in the playoffs, he makes mistakes. Yeah. And that's the thing that Hurts hasn't done. Although look, he had the sack fumble in the first Super Bowl between the Eagles and Chiefs, but like he played a now that I'm saying this, I know he threw a pick in the first half, but he played a more or less flawless game on Sunday.
But honestly, like Scott, who would you rather have, Lamar or Jalen Hurts?
I plead the fifth.
I think the answer is Lamar, but let's kill a little bit of a narrative too. Like Hurts's last 2 years have been kind of like we don't want to put the ball in your hands too much because we're worried you're going to make a mistake and it's going to be so we're going to make it about handing it off to Saquon. But 2 years ago when they were in the Super Bowl, he was second team All-Pro and second in MVP voting. Like he had a great year 2 years ago, and that's why no one was really overly surprised when the Eagles Chiefs 2 years ago turned into a shootout. Yeah, because people expected Jalen Hurts to do that. They just knew like Mahomes was probably going to outplay him late. This year, it was more about everything else, but then he went out and like did exactly what they asked him to do all year.
Yeah,
go 17 for 22, run the tush push, score, do what you need to with your legs. When it comes to it, the one interception was not very good, but as it turns out, they pinned the Chiefs on the 2 with that interception, and the Chiefs just punted it right back to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a third down play. It was a punt.
The only argument I'll make against it being a punt is they were in field goal range when they threw it. So
and it was similar to that Josh Allen play at the end of the Bills game. I think the hard part about Jalen Hurts is that year in the middle when they lose to the Bucs in the first round of the playoffs. Like they start that year 10-1 coming off the Super Bowl, and then I think they lose like 8 or 9 straight, including the playoff game. And if Jalen Hurts, like I just said, I love him for his leadership. You're supposed to hold your team together a little bit more as the quarterback, and they did it for whatever. And they're still obviously they're the reigning Super Bowl champions. That's way in the rearview mirror, but that's something that is kind of held against them a little bit and then they get Saquon Barkley, and then they win the Super Bowl. So it kind of looks like they needed Saquon or needed the influx of whatever talent, everybody being healthy to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, the reality of it is if you can't applaud Patrick Mahomes for the last 3 years. And what I mean by that is his numbers have gotten progressively worse season over season for 3 or 4 straight years. And the teams have, for the most part, gotten progressively better. And all I mean by that is they've won 2 Super Bowls, been to 3, right? Mm-hmm. And his numbers continue to get worse and worse. And it's because Mahomes knows he knows he's doing what he needs to do for the team to win games. Yeah. So you can't applaud Mahomes for that and not applaud Hurts for the same thing.
And it's not
his numbers getting worse than him doing what he knows he needs to do to help the team win.
It's not like I'm not. It's just that Patrick Mahomes has won 2 Super Bowls, been to 3 in 3 years. Jalen Hurts has been to 2 and won 1. And that's, I mean, it's the scoreboard at this point. It's the only guy that's as close to him. But Patrick Mahomes is been the only guy to do it better.
If you just look at the last 3 years, though, it's not that far apart. Like you said, been to 2-1-1, been to 3-1-2. Like it's as close as it could be. The thing is that Mahomes had the Super Bowl before, and Mahomes already had the reputation before these last 3 years. And Mahomes is in the past, he's won 2 league MVPs. So it's not like he's not capable of putting up the huge numbers and doing all of that. It's just the reason people are applauding him more for it is because they're saying, like, he could, he just isn't. And Hurts is in a little bit of the same boat because he got second in the MVP voting 2 years ago. So you don't, but it was one season. And so people are still questioning, like, could he, if he had to, carry a team?
Yeah. Let me be clear. I'm not trying to compare Mahomes to Hurts. I don't think they're in the same category. I don't think they're comparable. I don't think anyone is in the same category of Mahomes. Like, all of this, he kicked himself out of the GOAT conversation is stupid.
Yeah.
He's been to 7 straight AFC championship games. He has 3 Super Bowls. He's gotten to 5 out of the last 6 Super Bowls. We're talking about Lamar and Josh Allen. They haven't been able to get to 0, right? So, like, Jalen Hurts won one, great. Like, him and Mahomes are not in the same conversation.
In terms of the Mahomes GOAT conversation, I think the reality is if he wins that Super Bowl, it's probably more likely than not that when he finishes his career, he's ahead of Tom Brady in that conversation. By losing that Super Bowl, it becomes there's still a chance he's ahead of Tom Brady at the end of it, but there's also a good chance he's not.
Well, I think a lot of the argument was the pace argument, where before 30, he's won 4 Super Bowls. It took Tom however long it took him till 35 to get 7.
The difference is
AFC Championship game.
Yeah, the difference is Tom played till he was 45. I doubt Mahomes is going to do that. That gave him a lot of, like, extra stuff at the end.
And I mean, the year after they lost the Super Bowl, they went to another AFC Championship game, and obviously have been to the Super Bowl 5 out of the last 6 years. So it's not like it's over. Like, I mean, the season, like, they're gonna play again next year. Whether or not Travis Kelce's gonna be there is still up in the air. But he's gonna be back next year. It feels
over to people because people didn't think the Chiefs were very good all year, even though they won 15 games, which is kind of stupid, but people didn't think they were. And then they got blown out. So it validates people in saying the Chiefs sucked this year. Therefore, they're going to suck again next year and the run's over. But, like, if I'm betting on somebody to be in the Super Bowl out of the AFC next year, you definitely bet on the Chiefs over any of those other teams if you're smart.
Honestly, if you ask me, out of the 2 teams that might make it, of the 2 teams that just played in the Super Bowl, who's making it back, I'll take Kansas City. Even I'm saying that as a fan, but knowing Philadelphia, what they did after they lost the Super Bowl, what happens after they win the Super Bowl, knowing Nick Sirianni, like, I mean, how much do you trust him now? Love everything that's happened. They still have some questions. We'll see what happens next year, obviously. I mean, Super Bowl hangover. We'll see. Again, the Chiefs might be 5-11 next year for all we know, but more likely than not, 5-12, whatever. But more likely than not, probably not on both of those accounts even.
Yeah, it's obviously not over. They're not going to be 5-12. They certainly have some retooling on their roster that they need to do. I think everyone's relatively confident, including Vegas. To my knowledge, I think they're the Super Bowl favorite for next year, that Veach and Narita Mahomes can figure that out. One thing, before we leave this conversation, and I know you're probably trying to transition us on, which I don't think people are talking about enough, or I just haven't heard it mentioned, is when I got home late Monday night and was thinking about this in retrospect, like, the Chiefs just look tired, like physically and mentally. And I don't think it's being talked about enough that, so, this is football. We talk about things like how taxing it is when a team plays, on 5 days rest, or plays 3 games in 11 days, or when a team's coming off a bye week. There has never been a run like the Chiefs have been on. 7 straight years, 6 straight years where they played in the Super Bowl 5 out of 6 years. In 6 straight years, they've either played 3 or 4 playoff games. So 6 times 3.5 is 21 to 22 extra games over a 6-year period. This team has played way more football than anyone else in the NFL has over the
And
last
their
5
best
or 6
players have
years.
only gotten older.
And-
Travis
and-
Kelce.
And their best players are older. So to me, they probably shouldn't have gotten this far. Sasha, we've talked about before how the thing that has always been so impressive about the Chiefs is they never let go of the rope. And they hold on to the rope, they hold on to the rope, they hold on to the rope, and then Superman saves them at the end of the game, right? And this is the first game I can remember since that Tampa Bay game where they let go of the rope. And to me, this read like a team that was young, hungry, and more athletic against a team that was older and, quite frankly, just mentally and physically worn out.
Yeah. And the reality is, even really good NFL teams get blown out sometimes.
Right.
Teams that win the Super Bowl, a lot of times there's a game sometime during the regular season where they got blown out. It just happens sometimes. And sometimes it's what galvanizes them. And the Chiefs haven't had that happen since Super Bowl 55 against the Bucs. That's a long time to go without getting blown out.
Well, and I think it happened against the perfect team where the Philadelphia Eagles, they lost to them a couple years ago. There's that piece of it. There's Saquon Barkley it's his birthday. Same thing with Cooper DeJean if you want that to be part of your motivation. Vic Fangio's never beat them before. There's all different things piling. There's a three-peat hanging in the balance. So there's all different things hanging in the balance for everything to work out the way it did. And I mean, we can talk about football schematics till we're blue in the face, but the Eagles did everything right by just doing exactly what they did.
One quick clerical thing because I know there's probably tons of Broncos fans listening at this point, tongue in cheek, but the Chiefs did lose 38-0 in Week 18 to the Broncos. We all know they played one starter in the whole game, but that did happen. Just to clarify.
Yeah, if there's one play or clip which to me is emblematic of young, hungry, and athletic versus old, a little bit tired, and I don't want to use the word complacent, but just not as hungry. It's that I don't know if you've seen that play of Nolan Smith when Trey Smith is pulling, right guard pulling on a run play to Pacheco. And Nolan Smith just comes and absolutely just blows him to smithereens right into the back of Pacheco. And it's that's one of the best, biggest, nastiest right guards in the NFL.
He's gonna get crazy money this offseason.
Right? One of the best, point blank, one of the best, nastiest guards in the NFL. We've seen countless clips of Trey Smith just blowing people up. And he just that clip is emblematic of the entire game. Is the Eagles just beat the shit out of the Chiefs, right? They were faster to the ball. They were more hungry. And Trey Smith getting blown up like that is not they were better, but they're not that much better. But on Sunday, they were.
Yeah. Well, and I think the Chiefs thought it was more of a coronation where the whole week leading up where it was just all right, here we go. We're about to win the third straight Super Bowl. Nobody's ever done it before. Well, guess what? There's a reason nobody's ever done it before. And I mean, they made it farther than everybody else in history. I mean, nobody else had won back-to-back Super Bowls, then made it to the Super Bowl. But at the same time, you still have to go win the game. And it just seemed like the Chiefs.
They picked a bad time to lay an egg. There's no doubt about that. And they I don't know if it was complacency and the game plan wasn't good, or the Eagles' game plan was just, or the Eagles just. I mean, the reality is the Eagles definitely did just have better players, but they whatever the game plan was, it wasn't enough to overcome the Eagles having better players, which is what the Chiefs usually do. Every single Super Bowl they've played in, people have said the other team has better players, and they've won 3 out of 5 of them.
And that's everybody agreed on that going into the game, and we still picked the Chiefs.
Yeah, because we've seen it a bunch of other times where everybody said the other team has better players, and that's the only reason they've usually been underdogs. This time Vegas was we're not going to get fooled again.
Right.
and they got fooled the other way.
Even more so last year when the Chiefs were worse in the regular season. They were 11-6 and had that stretch where they're like 3-5 or whatever it was. Like
Yeah.
that was a worse Chiefs team on paper. And then going into this year, it was like,
yeah,
it's just weird.
Just to put a bow on the next year Super Bowl conversation, ESPN Bet put out their odds literally at like the second the Super Bowl ended. And I know these move around a little bit. So, but basically what they're telling you is it's the same Big Five as this year. The Chiefs and the Ravens, for whatever reason, started as the favorites at plus 650. And then the Eagles, Bills, and Lions were all plus 700. So it's basically all five of those teams tied for Super Bowl favorites. And then it drops off a lot to the 49ers at 14-1. So that's kind of the, and that'll change as the season goes on next year. But throughout the offseason, people are going to be looking at those five teams.
This opens up one of my favorite bets and or just betting questions is, say you just put $1,000 on each of those five teams right now. It'd probably pay off.
Yeah, basically what you're doing is you're saying those five teams over the field.
Right.
And if one of them wins, you make $2,000 because you put 5,000 down and you get 7-1, so you get 7,000 back. But you're risking 5,000 to win 2,000, so it's minus odds on those five versus the field is basically what it is.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Let's drop $1,000 on five.
We say we take a quick break, come back, talk a little bit about the NFL awards, and the moment everyone's been waiting for, Felix's thoughts on Kendrick Lamar. You listen to the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. We'll be right back.
Brain drain. That's the word I was looking for. I couldn't figure it out when you were listing all those Super Bowl odds.
Welcome back into the Matchup by Field Vision Sports. Excited to be with you. Excited to find out what Felix thought about Kendrick Lamar for sure, but we'll save that for the end. I know he's a halftime show aficionado. That's why I'm so excited about it. But I want to get into a little bit of a conversation that we've had slightly on the pod throughout the year, which is the roster building conversation between the AFC and the NFC. Basically, all of the best quarterbacks, I mean, you can look at it pretty easily and say, like, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow are the four best quarterbacks in the NFL. They all reside in the AFC, which makes it harder to build out other parts of your roster. In the NFC, it's all about weapons, Justin Jefferson,
AJ Brown.
AJ Brown. It's all about weapons.
Brandon Ayuk,
Jahmyr Gibbs. I was just thinking about receiver in the AFC has
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
But it's all about weapons and building a great defense to go with a quarterback who can manage the game. Exactly what the Eagles did this year with AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, and then a great defense. The Chiefs have won the last two Super Bowls doing it the other way. The Eagles won the Super Bowl this year doing it that way. Which conference has a better formula at this moment, Scott?
Yeah, I think one thing that I can't quite figure out is that this isn't just a current time phenomena, right? Like if you look at AFC and NFC quarterbacks who played in the Super Bowl over the last 25 years, there's like 6 dudes from the AFC. It's like Mahomes, Brady, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, and I'm leaving someone else out.
Joe Burrow played in one.
Joe Burrow played
the
in
Dolphins played in a bunch of Super Bowls
and
in
like
the 70s.
The Ravens had
Steelers with Terry Bradshaw.
The Ravens have 2 since.
Oh, sorry,
2000.
Joe Flacco is the only other one.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the NFC, it's like over the last 25 years, there's been 22 or 23 quarterbacks. So this is a phenomena that seems to have carried itself over a long period of the modern NFL. I think I don't think there's any right or wrong. Here's the way that I think about it. The NFC model is more high variance because if you to get it right, you have to hit on a number of draft picks over a really long period of time, right? So if you think about the Eagles and the roster that they built, like you hit on Cooper DeJean, you hit on Quinyon Mitchell, you hit on Jalen Carter, you hit on Jordan Davis, you hit on.
But also, Lane Johnson was a first-round pick in 2012. That's how long they've been this good. Like, been drafting this well, at least.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you have to hit on drafts year after year after year and like be really thoughtful about keeping those teams together, like when to extend veterans, who to bring in free agency. And so I do think it's more fickle, it's higher deviation, and that shows by the fact that not only have 23 to 23 different quarterbacks been to the Super Bowl over the last 25 years in the NFC, that also means that there's a lot more teams
right
that have been there.
By
right?
nature, if it's a lot more quarterbacks, then it's basically a different team every year. It's a revolving door. If you want sustained success, like the AFC, like if there's only 5 quarterbacks that have played in the Super Bowl in the AFC, most of those quarterbacks played on the same team for all or most of their career. Like Peyton Manning was on the Colts forever. Tom Brady was on the Patriots forever. And
even when Manning went to another team, he went to another AFC team
and made 2 Super Bowls with them. So, yeah.
Right. And that can, so I guess what that would tell you is the AFC model, if you can find that quarterback, is a hell of a lot safer. Right. Is a hell of a lot safer, right? Because just look at this year in the playoffs.
Yes.
The 4 AFC teams in the divisional round were the same.
Yeah.
Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, Texans, right? Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, Texans. Everyone kind of knew that all year. Whereas in the NFC, it was more or less complete turnover. So look, I now that I'm talking it through, the AFC model has to be more preferred, right? Because it gives you a higher chance of sustained success year over year. But if you get it right, you can build an NFC team that comes up against a less talented roster, just like what happened with the Eagles and the Chiefs.
Listen, I don't think the NFC teams aren't trying to get good quarterbacks. They just it just hasn't worked out for whatever reason. But the problem is like if you get Patrick Mahomes or you get Tom Brady, you're going to be good for a very long time. But you can easily draft a quarterback in the first round and have him be Josh Rosen. And then it sets your franchise back several years.
I even think, like, even on an individual game standpoint, the AFC team probably has a little bit of an advantage because how many spreads do we see between 2 good teams between 1.5 points, 2.5 points? And if you think it's going to be a close game, are you going to pick the better quarterback? Probably. And so, like, even like what Scott's saying, sustained success where you have your quarterback for a long period of time, even in those individual games, the last 2 Chiefs Super Bowl wins, why did the Chiefs win? Because it came down to who their quarterback was and ostensibly who their coach was and play caller. But like I think that even on an individual game standpoint, going into that, we were like, oh yeah, the Eagles are better, but comes down to coach and quarterback specifically. So we look at that, and I think the AFC teams even have the advantage with the game specifically and on the macro level.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made for that, although the NFC's winning their fair share. Chiefs won their 3, but like Matt Stafford's got 1, Jalen Hurts has 1, and Tom Brady, once he went over to the NFC, had 1. And the Bucs were built in this NFC model, even though they had Tom Brady. It was an old Tom Brady, and he didn't cost near as much as he wasn't a $50 million man.
But that was a 7-9 team the year before. Like that, they weren't even like a playoff team. And Tom Brady, I mean, obviously it was Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, changing things. But it's so interesting. And this is probably my favorite conversation to have in modern football because there are 8 different ways you can do it. And if you can get the Tom Brady thing to work out where you can get an older quarterback or a young quarterback drafted and you have this incredible team, like we'll see with the Vikings and JJ McCarthy, I think that could be the team that's next, like in the Brock Purdy-ish model where everybody else is great. Now we have this young quarterback who's also coming up in the world.
Yeah, I mean, not to downplay the argument, and I don't think Howie Roseman needs any more compliments. I think he's doing just fine these days. But the Eagles are paying Jalen Hurts,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, let's not forget that the Eagles aren't quite the Brock Purdy model, right? Or the approach that some of these other teams have taken. Like the Eagles are paying Jalen Hurts. They happen to pay him at a time where they nailed the 3 or 4 drafts leading up to that, right? To where they have
and after him too.
And after him, to where they have an incredible roster around him. But it's going to get harder for them too.
Yeah. Just to put some numbers on it, since 2000, the AFC is 15-10 in the Super Bowl. In terms of this argument, though, I will point out that 2 of those wins were the Ravens, which were definitely like defense and defense and weapons and not quarterback centric teams. So if you just want to look at it like that way,
and then the Rams, like both the greatest show on turf and this most recent Super Bowl, like those are at least offensive led wins, even though it's mainly like Kurt Warner and Matthew Stafford aren't these legends Hall of Famer Kurt Warner, excuse me. But I think like even in those are NFC teams that won the offense.
It's never like you can generalize things, but there's always going to be like good quarterbacks in the NFC and good defenses in the AFC. But it is interesting to look at the difference over the last 25 years and how generally the teams are built. Let's transition the conversation. One of those AFC quarterbacks that we're talking about won the MVP, and it wasn't Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen, who was named second team All-Pro, took home the MVP. Felix, did they get it right?
I mean, I think so. It's kind of interesting. Like a lot of the conversation on why Lamar Jackson wasn't going to win the MVP wasn't about his numbers being not worthy of it. Like he had a great year. In fact, it was better than his MVP year last year. It was about you haven't won, like you haven't got to the Super Bowl even. Like, and usually 3-time MVPs have won a Super Bowl, and I understand like that shouldn't matter as much. But also, when you look at the grand scheme of history, these things do matter. And like the conversation was the same exact thing in the NBA a couple years ago with Nikola Jokic. And I know different sports, they kind of change different things and how much an impact one player can have on one team changes. But with Lamar Jackson, I don't think there is another player that has a bigger impact on his team and organization, because the Ravens have built their team for the way Lamar Jackson plays. And so it's up to him, to me at least, like particularly in that situation, you got to get to a Super Bowl. And they've gotten awful close and run into Mahomes and Josh Allen, and don't get me wrong there. So like there's the precedence that he just hasn't eclipsed yet.
Yeah.
And these things do matter. So Josh Allen, you get your first one. Go ahead.
It's a narrative award, and the reality is like they do this voting before the playoffs happen. So it is a regular season award, but he hadn't been to Super Bowl thus far. And so it's like, we don't want to give him his third because there's a good chance he's not going to go this time. And you brought up the Jokic Embiid year. Jokic ended up winning the NBA Finals the year that they gave Embiid the MVP over him, when it probably should have been Jokic.
Right.
But they hadn't seen it yet. The voters hadn't seen it yet. And like,
then he got it next.
There is a lot of narrative that goes into this. And it's also like lifetime achievement. Like Josh Allen should probably have an MVP at some point in his career. So we're going to give it to him instead of giving Lamar his third.
Some of that I agree with everything you're saying. I also think for this year in particular, it was a little bit of more with less. So the reality is that the Bills had a better record than the Ravens. The Bills were the only team that beat the Chiefs in the AFC. And if you go back to September, I don't actually think we were talking about the Bills as the Big Five, and it's because the Bills cleaned house in the offseason, right? They got rid of a bunch of people. They didn't really add anyone, and I think everyone expected this Bills team, and particularly this Bills offense, to take a step back. And Josh Allen, basically, I mean, that we talk about this all the time, but it's a great quarterback elevates the team around him and elevates the teammates around him. And I don't think there was any disputing that Josh Allen did that this year. And like Lamar had a great season too, statistically a better season than last year. But I think everyone looked at it and said, well, yeah, but like they gave you Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Right. and you got new offensive coordinator, and we added a bunch of pieces around you. We expected you to do that. We didn't really expect Josh Allen to do that. So I think that was I think the voters got it right. I think that played into it as well.
I think your point about the better record, and in turn, the Bills ended up with the higher playoff seed, which is all you can really go off of because the voting happens before the playoffs. I think that's a really good one because in this like narrative power ranking driven world that we live in, everybody kept saying like the Ravens are better than the Bills and we like the Ravens more than the Bills. And so it's like you almost think like, well, Lamar led his team to more than what Josh Allen did in the regular season. But the reality is he didn't. The Bills had the better record. They weren't playing for anything the last 2 weeks, which is also what hurt Josh Allen in terms of numbers because he didn't have to play the last couple of weeks. Lamar had a couple of good games. That's what even made it close. But if you ignore that fact and say, like, the Bills got a higher playoff seed, they had a better record, and Josh Allen had a way worse roster around him, it all makes sense.
I can almost assure you that I never ranked the Ravens ahead of the Bills in my power rankings.
You're the only
all
one,
year.
Felix.
Maybe. I might have done it once, but it wasn't on purpose.
Yeah. Other awards that got handed out, Saquon, unsurprisingly, gets Offensive Player of the Year. Kevin O'Connell gets Coach of the Year, even though he got it handed to him by the other top candidate on the last game of the season, Dan Campbell. But it's hard to argue with. Like, we all picked the Vikings, I think, to get last in that division going into the season. I think, actually, I remember this well. On this very pod, I brought up the Vikings, like, potential of making the playoffs before the season and like what their ceiling was, and Scott and Cody kind of laughed at me.
I remember that.
All I was talking about was like maybe they could win 9 games, and it was like, no, there's no chance they can win 9 games. So given all that, like, I'm fine with Kevin O'Connell. Pat Surtain the second with a big bounce back year wins Defensive Player of the Year, and the Havoc ratings reflect that. I know we got some grief going into the season not having him high enough, but his Havoc ratings were good for this season. He wasn't the number 1 corner, but he was close enough. I still would have given it to Zach Bond.
I was about to say the best Havoc player on the best defense in the league.
Yeah. And he had an interception in the Super Bowl to wrap it all up. He's a free agent. He probably won't be back with the Eagles next year. Joe Burrow wins Comeback Player of the Year. Jared Verse, Defensive Rookie of the Year. We mostly had that, although I think when push came to shove, we ended up going with Kamari Lassiter in our end-of-year awards. And Jaden Daniels wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. So not a lot of bones to pick with any of that. Jaden Daniels was obvious.
My only beef would be, and you brought it up, is Surtain had a great year. Like, there was nothing about it that stood out to me as exceptional. And there are some big games where that Broncos defense gave up a lot of points. So I would have given it to Bond, to your point. Highest Havoc rated player on the best defense on the team. Jeez, I couldn't get that out.
Extremely consistent too was Bond. Because, like, I wrote the All Havoc articles every single week, and Bond, he was tied with one other person in terms of making the All Havoc and Threat teams. He made it 7 times, and didn't play the last week of the season. So 7 times in 16 games. The only other person who came close was on the Threat side, I believe. George Kittle.
Ooh,
George Kittle made it 7 times.
I mean, the other thing is, and we talked.
No, it was Saquon too. Saquon and Kittle were the highest on the Threat side.
We talked.
He was an edge rusher last year.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot in the lead up to the season, but the linebacker position is a lot like the running back position on offense. It's underappreciated, undervalued. The guys don't get paid as much, but the reality is like those linebackers in the modern NFL get forced into, you got to rush the passer, you got to stop the run, you got to be able to defend pass routes, right? And Zach, I mean, we saw it on Sunday, but Zach Bond played such a key role in not only stopping the run on that Eagles defense, but also like being, when I said they were in every window of every short passing route that the Chiefs wanted to throw, like a lot of times that was Zach Bond. So like he just played such a critical part in the number one overall rated defense. I just think linebackers don't get the respect that they need, especially in the way that the NFL is shifting back to like, we're going to run the ball. This is run and pass, and we're going to try to put you in conflict, run and pass. So who becomes the most important player in that scenario? It's the linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Let's shift gears a little bit here. As the resident halftime show aficionado, and I know Felix is that because he talks about him, and also potentially the coolest guy on this pod. What did you think?
Yeah, woo! I'm so much cooler than you guys. Yeah.
I don't think it's.
Sorry, I'll take off coolest guy.
I think it's no. I think that's a fair assessment, but also not a great award to be cooler than a 40-year-old with 3 kids.
I'll just put it this way: most likely to have been a dancer in this halftime show on this pod. Felix, what did you think of the Kendrick Lamar halftime show?
Oh,
also still not very likely to have been a dancer in that show, given his offensive lineman status.
Footwork, baby. Do you ever run an inside zone? Come on now. You ever pull? Sasha? I don't think so. I think it's honestly a treat every time that as America on America's biggest stage, we got to watch the downfall of a Canadian in Drake. That was incredible. And like, just especially Kendrick Lamar, like and I say this in the nicest way possible. He's like this happy little elf. The way he was just jigging around on stage, like he just looked so happy to be tearing down this man's entire, honestly, iconic portfolio. Like, I mean, I'm not the biggest Drake fan, but Kendrick Lamar is like, no, I'm untouchable. And I think the most interesting part about this is, you'll see how cool I am here. The stages when the field is set, you guys might not have been able to see it live because you were sitting there.
I went and rewatched the TV version on YouTube yesterday.
But it's a PlayStation controller, and it lights up in this way where
pick up on that.
it's a cheat code in GTA it's cheat code for full health, full armor. So this guy going into this knows he's untouchable, invincible, and then he did what he did. And so that's what it is to me. Like, I mean, I think Bomani Jones said it on his podcast this week. God forbid my hater be this organized. Like this or like he won Grammys last week on his diss track on you and dropped an album and did the Super. Like, look how silly you look, Drake. You stupid Canadian.
He is a I was in the stadium. I thought it was cool. I didn't know every song. I don't think it matters. I don't think everyone needs to or is entitled to know every song.
I didn't know all the Tom Petty and the Heartbreaker songs back in the day.
I think it is so impressive how much of a like master storyteller and poet he is. Like that. Your point about the GTA cheat code, like I didn't know that. It's the first time I've heard it, but there's just like a million little nuggets in the way that he tells his story. And to your point, like how organized and orchestrated it all is together is like I'm just like, and that's jealous. I'm jealous at his ability to like storytell and be a poet and orate. And like, I love the part and thought it was like so poetic how like the American flag with all of the dancers who were also all black, like America built on the backs of black people. Like I thought, I don't know. I just thought it was quite impressive. And I think it's bullshit that everyone thinks that the halftime show has to be built for them. Guess what? There's 300+ million Americans and we're not all the same. So it's not going to be built for everyone every year.
And Serena Williams crip walked in front of everybody again. She ran it back over a decade later. Like, it's just honestly incredible. He got the greatest tennis player of all time, male or female. I don't care. And she was like, you know what? Screw you too, Drake. We dated a little bit. You're the worst. And so, like, it's just
to piggyback,
incredible.
Just to piggyback on the downfall of a Canadian thing, we witnessed the downfall of a Canadian on America's biggest stage on the shores of the Gulf of America.
All All right.
Golly.
All right.
Sorry,
I
maybe
did.
too far.
I did think it was. I was in the stadium, so didn't get to see the commercials, but I did think. I heard some analysis afterwards that it was quite funny that like a minute and a half before the entire broadcast was littered with NFL commercials about stopping hate. And then the entire halftime show was just like
I hate you.
one rapper spewing hate.
I
Like
hate
the entire performance was an orchestrated display of hate against another person.
I hate, and Drake is suing him for suing him so much. He's probably suing the NFL now by the end of the week. Like, it's honestly insane that how invincible Kendrick Lamar is, and like we're just all right, yeah.
What'd you think
Anyway,
about
screw you,
the
Drake.
Felix? What'd you think about the Samuel L. Jackson part? The like his role in the whole thing.
I think Samuel L. Jackson, he's probably not my favorite actor of all time, but I'll never not be happy to see him. And I think like particularly in that, like you're not expecting an actor in a live performance at the Super. Like it's not expected. And for that matter, Serena Williams, like I just love the shock and all that he didn't bring out as many musical guests as he could have, and SZA is phenomenal. She sounded ridiculous, like live ridiculous. So I mean, it honestly, from a show perspective, if you don't look at it from whatever political angle you want to look at it from, and just look at it for you're looking at a painting of some sorts, a 13-minute long painting, it was wonderful.
I mean, but and again, like, I don't think that we shouldn't be looking at it from a political point of view.
Yeah.
Like the halftime show doesn't have to be for everyone. It can't by definition be for everyone. And like, so what are you gonna do? Put some old ass band up there like Aerosmith or YouTube, and you make a bunch of old like white dudes happy and alienate everyone else? Like,
Bruce, come on back,
I love what Jay-Z has done, like bringing some youth and some modernity to the halftime show.
Did
So
you just call
I think
Bono's
that's a big
band
win.
YouTube?
That's how
I called them U2.
Okay.
I wonder if they've ever tried to sue YouTube for copyright infringement.
I don't think they have. It's not
Two
the
different
same
words.
thing.
Two different words. All right, fellas. Super Bowl's in the books. Season of Super Bowl 59 is in the books. Our first season's in the books.
With all that being said, after the Super Bowl halftime show was over, my favorite team was down 24 points, and then ended up losing. So like it didn't matter. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo. Yeah.
Felix, do you want to schedule an entirely other pod to spend time talking about the halftime show?
Yeah, no, for sure. I could fill a couple hours with it. I used to fill a radio show about it because Sasha would always leave me the week after the Super Bowl, but it's fine.
No, I'd be there and I'd just nod my head as you talked about the halftime show, because just put me in the bucket of people who like I've seen live music like twice in my life. I go to sporting events and that's it. And so I just don't have opinions on it, like really. But I agree with everything you guys said about it, and it makes sense. And yeah.
Williams was there.
Scott, anything you want to wax poetic on about Field Vision's first season being in the books?
I don't want to wax poetic. I just want to thank you guys and Cody and the team for, Jesse and Cameron and Jackson and Nelton and everybody for an awesome first J-Miz, an awesome first season at Field Vision. And look, we talked about it before. Like, we went 18-2 in week 1, and we talked about the model working. The model works. We were 7-3 in the Super Bowl, 8-2 in the conference championship round, over 60% versus Vegas from week 9 on, and the latest iteration of our model. So, we're coming back for more next season. We've already announced some of that stuff. So keep listening. We'll keep bringing you data and hopefully an enjoyable way to listen to. And yeah.
Hey Scott.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott, you want to know something?
What?
They not like us. I'm just saying.
Like only Felix can say it.
All right. That's going to do it for the matchup. Last episode of this season. Follow us on X at Field Vision MI. Check out at S Bushka 2 on X too. Some great stuff coming out of there.
He doesn't need any more promotion. At Felix R. Johnson. No, I'm joking.
Check us out on Instagram, Field Vision Sports. Go to the revamped website, fieldvisionsports.com. Take a look at all the products we're offering out there. Some of them are to-come products. And obviously the app is still live. Download that. Have a good time. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.